This is National Chess Master Rats at ICC, here to examine a game played in Team 4545 League, Team 60, Nanning versus Evans 7284, and this was played in the 6th round and was selected as Game of the Week. Let's have a look. I'm happy to report both sides took their time. They almost took too much time, as we will see. For the first few moves, they're playing off the increment. Every move they get 45 seconds added to their clock. But then they both start going into long thinks, black particularly so. So that's a good thing. You want to take your time. But maybe they didn't take enough time or took too much time, so they didn't have any at the critical times. And what's basically happened here, black has started out with a Queen's Gambit decline, but taken it into a Stonewall Dutch. A solid system. It can lead to kingside attacks by black. This bishop doesn't have much scope and mobility. White should have at least the advantage of the first move from it. And white develops another piece with tempo. And I'm not too sure about this move by white. I'm sure it's probably in the book. The reason I would not recommend this move is because what it does is, here, we'll just take a look. It opens up the lines for the light squared bishop. And now we're going into one of the themes of the Queen's Gambit declined exchange variation, that of the minority attack. I've explained this in other videos. Let me just explain it here. Okay, let's divide the line, the board in half between D1 and E1 and E8 and D8. On the left side of the board, white has 3 pawns, black has 4. And on the right side of the board, the king side, white has 4 pawns, black has 3. So what you have is what we call the classical minority attack. This pawn does and will go up to E3. And white's objective is to try to advance a pawn to B5. And the purpose is, if black takes, black has an isolated queen pawn. And that's a weakness and a target that could be assaulted in the middle game and the end game. And if black doesn't take, white takes on C6. And if black takes with a piece, he's got his isolated queen pawn. If he takes with the pawn, there's a backward pawn on the open file. And black is supposed to be doing the same thing on the other side of the board. The pawn will go to F4, and if white takes, white gets an isolated queen pawn. And if white doesn't take, black will take on E3, and white will either get an isolated queen pawn if he takes with a piece, or he'll have a backward pawn on the open file. And that's essentially the strategy. To some degree, this is accelerated a little bit for black because he's already got his pawn up to F5. But it's not going to go this line, as we will see. But let's back it up, and I'll show you why I think taking on D5 wasn't the better move. I think a better move is E3. And let's just back it up again for 1 second. Let's burn a move for white. Let's play something dumb, okay? Now I think maybe black can take this pawn and might be able to hold on to it, much like he does in some of these Slav defense positions where white has to play A4. I guess white could play A4 here. But you're kind of getting into something a little different. Again, we wasted a move, but what I mean by different is different. You're not getting your development out. But E3, what E3 does is it says, okay, black, you want to take this pawn. I'm going to capture right away. I'm going to develop another piece. And there's no rule making black take, but you never know what your opponent's going to play. And in this case, look what's happened. After 7 moves, white has 4 minor pieces developed. Black has 1. It's black's move. But black is essentially down 2.5 tempos. That's almost a pawn deficit. And let's just illustrate this point a little further. Let's make nothing but developing moves. And when I analyze a game, and people ask me, how do you analyze a game? I say, well, make active moves and developing moves. Because, developing moves are usually never bad. And a lot of times it's hard to try to start anything quick. A premature attack is just going to fall short. But notice here, let's develop the white queen rook to C8, or C1 rather. Now, black's got to get untangled with his minor pieces. It's not all that easy. Now, where do you want the queen? Let's put her on E2. Okay, we'll tempo the bishop. And now for what it's worth, I'm getting the bishop developed to d7, and then white brings his rook over. Now if you notice, both sides have 4 minor pieces developed, and white has his queen developed and black doesn't. Black hasn't moved any of his heavy pieces on the back row, so there's those 3 tempos behind. But since it's black's move, he can develop one and be caught up in development. Okay, so for instance, he could play or be that much closer to catching up. How do you take advantage of a development? Take advantage of when you have the development advantage? Well, it's simple. You got to break the position open. Because the open lines will favor your pieces. So from this position, white's looking to try to find ways to open up the game. It might not all be all that easy. For instance, e4 will leave white with an isolated queen pawn, but that isn't so bad. You're getting open lines. Let's just take a look. And this isn't forced by any means, but if you look at the position now, black is a little closer to catching up in development. Now he's got a very serious weakness on e6. It's assaulted twice, it's defended twice, and white can put some more pressure on it. And on move 12, I put the rook on d1. It could have easily gone to e1, and that would have been another attacker on that square. Plus the pawn is pinned, it can't advance. Black may have to waste a move with king h8, taking his king out of play for the ending. Needless to say, white probably has a slight advantage here. Okay, so that's kind of how you analyze. You just make good moves for your opponent by both sides. And when you're actually playing a game, you don't know if your opponent's going to make good moves. Maybe he won't. That's why you want to try to play the most active lines you can. Okay, so now let's go forward a little bit. Now here's a good question. Did this bishop belong on e7? We'll see why in a moment. Okay. Now, this seems to be the critical juncture of where the game starts to change. And if you look at both clocks, black has just taken, let me just show you, black has just taken about 9 minutes on that move because his clock went down 8 minutes and he gains 45 seconds on this time. So he did get some thought to it. So objectively, the best move for black is to castle and then plan to play queen e8, queen h5, finish the development with the queenside pieces, get the knight into e4, back it up, and try his luck assaulting the white king, because normally the white king will castle kingside here too. That's a normal standard plan, but there's a small wrinkle in the armor here, and let me show you what it is. It's queen c2, and this puts some pressure on f5, and if black defends the pawn, he's cutting off the path that his queen wants to go to. If you defend with g6. So I was kind of tinkering around with this, saying, well, what if we just give up this pawn? Well, that's possible. White might not want to take that pawn just now, and I'll show you why. See, one drawback with white's position is he hasn't castled, and there's a discovery available. Now the queen needs to run away. Where are you going to put it? h3, g4. Black might be able to generate some play here against with a pin. Okay, let's see. Let's take this out a little further. Bishop b4 seems to force rook c1, and for what it's worth, black's got a little pressure here. Let's see. Queen g6 threatens a move like rook takes. Might threaten it. Let's see. I'm guarding I'm protecting the bishop on g5. Okay, so bishop h4. Black for giving up a pawn, black seems to have a fair amount of play. He might even be able to offer this knight because I don't think white can take it. Queen takes is met by queen g2. None of this is forced, but suddenly, one thing that's happened is black has picked up a development advantage. He's done this by sacrificing a pawn. So what this leads black to do is to drive that bishop out to break that pin, because the moment he castles and plays queen e8, White has the option to double black's pawns. So black decides to take the bull by the horns and chase that bishop out of there. And he's taking his time doing it. But now black is concocting a new plan. And his plan is he wants to castle queenside and launch an attack against the white king, who he expects will castle kingside. And yet here we are at move 10, and neither side is castled. And what's kind of interesting here is you could get positions where both sides castle kingside, both sides castle opposite. One case, white queenside, black kingside, and vice versa, black queenside, white kingside, which is what happens. So it's extremely tricky as to what to do here. And like I say, both sides are using their time. And black develops a bishop. And here's the indication that he wants to eventually castle queenside, because white developed the bishop just yet. And maybe he wants to back up f5, with queen c8 or queen d7 or something. We don't quite know here. If he's afraid of pressure on f5 by way of a battery of queen c2, but you can always throw knight e4 in and stop all that plan cold. But let's just take a quick look here. Suppose black castles kingside. Now, if he does his pawn assault against a white king castling kingside, his own king could be a little exposed, but it might even be more exposed on the queen side, because when you have opposite side castling, both sides launch attacks, and we'll see how that takes place here in a moment. But white has the option now to try to castle queenside, and there you have it, just like that. And if black captures with either his bishop or knight on g3, suddenly white has a half-open h-file, and white would probably have the better prospects of an attack here, because notice one thing: white's supposed to attack on the queen side. He hasn't even developed a single thing over there, so it's going to be 3 moves before he gets his queen, bishop, and knight out, and then he has to start running his pawns. Okay, so let's back it up and note that he develops the bishop with the idea of castling queenside, and now he tries h5. He's trying to trap that bishop, but that can't be stopped. But he's taking a lot of time doing it. And I'll say one thing about time. See, 45 minutes to start the game, even though you get a 45-second, it's not a realistic time control compared to what you find in real chess tournaments. They tend to run 40 moves in 2 hours and say sudden death in an hour, or 40 moves in 90 minutes and then a 30-second increment every move, and then sudden death 1 hour. They rate FIDE tournaments something along that line, and that means your good game of chess is going to last 3 to 5 hours. The E-time of a Team 45 League game means if they both take all their time and it goes about 40 moves, the game's over in 2.5 hours. So it's not uncommon to see players in a real long tournament having under 30 minutes on their clock, but usually they're reaching move 20-25 when this happens, even in the worst case time control pressure. Okay, so but they continue to take their time, and now both sides have given up their king 5 squares, or e4 and e5. Black can plant a knight on e4 at any moment. I don't think he does, though. I think he should have at some point. But it wouldn't have been a bad move right here. Let's see, unless I'm missing something. Let's see. So the point is, you're attacking a bishop that's loose. And if white takes the knight on e4, black's going to get a protected pass pawn and a new diagonal for that light squared bishop that I was talking about was so weak earlier. And if white doesn't take, and just say he saves his bishop by bringing it to h2, or maybe even developing the queen to f3, black has a powerful knight on the board, which is something he wants, especially if he's going to try to attack the white king. And even if white does play queen f3, at some point black can play a rook to g8 and pressure that further. So I think a knight move to e4 was called for by black, but he doesn't do it, and he still doesn't do it. Now he breaks the potential pin because he's going to castle queenside. He doesn't want that knight, I mean the bishop on h4 to crab or rook on d8. But now the bishop, when he castles queenside, the knight becomes pinned because nothing is guarding the bishop on e7. So now look at the clocks now. White has 13 minutes. Black has 7 minutes. Now it's true they get a 45-second increment, but black only has 7 minutes to play with, and then he gets a 45-second increment every time, every move. Again, a long time control should give you about an average of 3 minutes a move, something you never have in 45-45. You have under 2 minutes a move on the average if the game goes 40 moves. So black's got some serious time issues here, and his game is solid. White has some potential here. White could pick up the bishop pair with knight g6, but then why give up that wonderful knight on e5? So white plays queen a4, getting ready to attack on the queen side, which is something that he wants to do. Had black castle kingside instead, his king might have been safer on that side, as it turns out, even though the h5 pawn would be weak. Anyway, let's go forward. And black makes a preventive maintenance move, covers a7. And now white plays a kind of a sneaky move, trying to play knight b5, get that knight into play. And black stops that. But white makes a mistake here coming up. He misses a nice combination, and he takes the knight on d7. But what he missed was knight takes c6 check. Now black must get out of check. You can take the queens off if you want. It doesn't matter if you do it with or without them. But the bishop on e6 falls, and white is just up a clear pawn. The queens could still be on the board, but I don't think black has enough compensation here for the pawn he's lost. So white missed that shot. Oh, hit the wrong. Here we go. Revert. Okay. But white playing a combination here, which probably was okay. I think it would have netted him a pawn, but black misses his way here. And one of the reasons he misses his way, I think, is because of the time constraint. He's down to 2.5 minutes on this move. What's that? 150 seconds? It's kind of hard to see a long continuation that could follow, but black falls apart. He figures he's lost a pawn. No, he hasn't lost a pawn. But he has to get back the exchange, so he puts the rook down here and attacks something. But still, he moved kind of quick. Only 12 seconds came off his clock, meaning he took 57 seconds. But there was an interesting move here that black could have played, and that was c5. The point of c5 is it uncovers an attack on the queen, and it uncovers an attack on the bishop. So white has to play very accurately here. White must take the pawn on d5. Everything else is a disaster. And now he's temporaring the black queen, but since white is on the black queen, or black is on the white queen, white can grab this bishop. Because if knight takes, bishop takes, and suddenly black has the exchange ahead. White will get a pawn here, or will he? No, he can't take with the c pawn. d3 will fall. And so the d4 will fall as a result. So white needs to safeguard his queen. Let's try c4. Now black needs to move his queen somewhere where it stays on the rook. Let's just do f8 for the fun of it. And now white's just up 2 pawns, but black has some activity here. There's a potential queen check. This pawn is now guarded. Now this he can play bishop c6 with the threat of queen takes h3 and queen takes g2 mate. nothing is exactly forced here. Maybe white would do better by putting the king on h2 here. But then maybe I can't put rook g8 because it falls. But black can still maybe get a little bit of play here, and he's only down 2 pawns, but he's got an active game. Uh, but what he did just turned out to be worse for him, and we'll see why here in a moment. First, white gains a tempo on the queen, and now black's just a piece down, and he safeguards the bishop on d3, and pretty much the game is over here. Now this leads to a quick mate if, I believe, let's see, if pawn takes, queen check forces here, and then you just put the queen on the back rank, and like I say, a quick mate. But white gets a little play here, or black gets a little play here, but he's running out of time. Now this threatens some nasty discoveries, and the knight. But unfortunately, the knight can just stop the discoveries and take the rook, and white's a whole rook ahead here. And they play on a couple more moves. Black's got 2 pawns for the rook, but that's just not enough. And now the pawn on f5 is going to fall, but black didn't wait for it to happen. Black chose to resign the game. So time was definitely a factor, but it was good that black did take his time. Okay, it's good that he did, because maybe he wouldn't have had such a good position, or with the chances he did, had he gone quicker. Who knows what could have happened? Did black really have a good position? Let's go back to move 16 when he castled queenside. So we want to go back 26. That's the command, I think. I'll take it back 26 half moves. That's just one move before. Okay, so here's where the battle lines are drawn. Black has castled queenside. White has castled kingside. Black wants to attack on the open G file. White wants to use the A, B, and C files to attack the black king. But black has left himself only 7 minutes to play, and pretty much 40 moves is a good average. He's got to make move 40. He's got to make 24 moves in 7 minutes plus a 45-second increment every time. So 7 minutes is 420 seconds. So he's close to having a time control of about 40. He can take about a minute per move here and only lose a little bit of time on his clock, but a minute is still kind of quick. Just a net result of Team 45 time control. Again, in a normal game, you have just under 2 minutes of move average. Now black's cut that in half by getting into time pressure early. This is the kind of position black wants to be able to spend about 15 minutes on trying to figure out what to do. Of course, it's white's move here. What did white play? Now, white started his attack. Now the question is, did black start his attack? And as I mentioned earlier, one drawback with having the bishop back on e7 is it's pinned, and he can't get the knight e4 in, which maybe he could have earlier. Again, he's having to react to white's threats. See, white makes 2 moves on the queen side. Black's responding both times on the queen side. So where's black's attack? It never happened. And now there's some pressure on e6, and black's move guarded the bishop on e7, but it stopped the possibility of getting knight e4 in. Let's back it up. Look at that one more time. Had black put his knight on e4, clearly he could do it here. He can't castle queenside now. He's not tempoing the bishop, but white can't really get at that king. Well, maybe he can. Let's see. Bishop e2. The point of bishop e2 is to pressure h5. You can't, if you play knight or bishop f7, bishop f7, knight takes f7, will win a pawn. and maybe you have to do this maneuver. Now, I think you're gonna lose. You might lose a pawn here. Let's see. Knight takes, pawn takes. I can't take with the pawn. The knight's falling. Okay. Now you drop the pawn, and the black king is dangerously exposed here. So he missed his chance to get to e4 right here. But then again, h5 could become a nuisance. So let's try this move. Let's push the pawn here. That forces this. Now we'll play knight e4. Okay. It threatens to take the bishop and stop white from castling. Although he can castle by hand. What does white do here? Put the bishop on e3? Well, it's going to be kind of a dead piece there, and black has the nice square g3. Again, I don't think white has anything to fear, or black has anything to fear if you take this. So let's take it with the knight. We want to put the bishop here. The idea is we want to give this check. Black may just have to give up castling privileges, but hey, you know what? You can't always get what you want. And the king actually might be reasonably safe on d8. Oh, that drops this pawn with check. No, that's no good. So I guess white should take it off, take that knight off on e4. So what went wrong with black's game? Why didn't it work out for him? Well, you can still do knight e. Well, you're running into pressure on h5. You know, it seems like black just started his attack just a little too early. Pushing h5 might have been a mistake. Everything was safe up until then. You can still get knight e4, and maybe this is the time when maybe now's the time for knight e4. And you know, if f3, well, you know, if you have to give an open file, you have to give an open file. But you can still get your queen off the back rank and get ready to castle queenside if that's your plan. And it might be a position where black can actually castle kingside and be reasonably safe. So, you know, the game, all games of chess are even for a while, and then suddenly an error is made and the game falls apart. Even though white missed knight takes c6, his continuation was fine. He ended up winning the game, and black could have had a little nuisance play in there, but black didn't find it, again, because of time. But anyway, I thank you so much for looking, waiting for games from the playoffs to be elected, and I'll make more for this tournament. And thanks for your time. Take care.